welcome here today to our second and final primary national debate here for the AP Gov. My name is Jaden Taylor, your host for today's pre-debate show. We're going to have a couple different people here today. We're going to see a little bit of Luke Steiner, a Democratic analyst, as well as Ben Kutler. A lot to see here today. We'll get you a little bit into the last information these past 2 weeks. It's been a busy 2 weeks. Looking at the results, we started off with our primaries. The Iowa caucus was a huge win for Republican Elizabeth Matz. This was entirely not seen out of the gate from going for Elizabeth overall. Of course, only 3 voters in this state in the Republican side, but Matz being one of them, as well as her campaign manager being the other, were able to get that 2 votes and able to win the Iowa caucus just about 2 weeks ago. A really big win for Matz. Definitely was not seen, and I think definitely put originally leader Min win a little bit on his heels. So then going to New Hampshire, Republicans once again kind of get mixed up. There was not a single Republican vote within that ballot. They could have gotten 20 different delegates if any one of the 4 different candidates at the time could have even gotten a singular vote. That was really tough to see, especially for the Republican side. For the Democrats, this was a huge win for Missouri candidate Luca Lafata-Hornillos. Big win for him. This essentially put him really in the driver's seat to start off with, especially after a really struggling Iowa caucus. This really put Luca kind of in the mix of everything. It's been a lot of back and forth. Jimmy Stacy got second here in that primary result, but definitely was not exactly what he wanted, but still staying around there with another 10 votes for himself. Then for Cade Preister, another third-place finish. Only 4 delegates for this one, but definitely not where Preister wanted to be, especially in a state like New Hampshire, to where he really thought he had a lot of backing, but a big push behind for Preister. Then looking at the South Carolina primary that we saw this past Tuesday, this was really big for Min once again. It's a huge win for Min. Elizabeth Matz nor Thomas Pate were able to get a singular vote, nor Nicholas Lunger as well, were able to get a singular vote on the Republican side. Min once again put himself really far-fetched and in between past any other Republican candidate. We'll get more on Min here in a minute. For the Democrats, this one was really mixed up. Luca, right after a big win at New Hampshire, really struggled in South Carolina. Preister blew this one away. It was kind of a flip of all stories. Luca got the same amount of votes as Gabe Barrows, who's really struggled so far this year for this election campaign. Jimmy Stacy and Cade Preister both tied in that primary, which is really big for the both of them. And really, as we're going to see here coming next, these 2 are really going to be your 2 frontrunners for the Democrats. Then looking at finally just yesterday at Arizona, Min once again takes home Arizona with ease. Not a singular vote for any one of the other groups, either the Matz campaign, Pate campaign, nor the Lunger campaign. But big thing here to see for the Democrats. A big loss for Luca Lafata-Hornillos, especially right after losing South Carolina and still getting no delegates, even with only 1 vote in that class. We don't even see Luca even getting 1 single vote for the Democrats. Stacy, Jimmy able to get a really big win here in Arizona. Big one for him. Preister, once again, is still not able to catch up to Stacy, but is still keeping himself in this mix. We'll get more to that here in a moment. But looking at the overall results for these past 2 weeks, we've seen 4 really big primaries so far. Min is by far the Republican candidate that we're going to see here, but there's still a lot to talk to about both for Min going forward. Some scandal about him once again, as we've seen so much here in this election so far. Elizabeth Matz, with that 1 win in Iowa, is even keeping her somewhat off the goose egg. Lunger as well as Pate are way out of this race, but somehow have not dropped out. We'll get a little bit more into a possibility of some dropouts here coming up in a little bit. But the Democrats, this is a really, I think, a 2-man heavy, strong set with Stacy as well as Preister, both really vying for that top spot. Preister just keeping himself in a little bit. Stacy with those really 2 big wins in those last 2 groups with South Carolina as well as Arizona. Luca Lafata-Hornillos, this was a huge loss for Luca and that entire campaign, especially when they thought how highly this group could be, how much that last debate that we had just 2 weeks ago really thought that they really helped out Luca. But overall, Luke has just continually dropped numbers with the primaries, even though a lot of our polls are saying that he is one of the best overall managed candidates going forward. But I know, especially with a lot of the elections that we've been seeing, anything can happen, especially of how the voters work out. So a big thing coming up for these big debates. This debate is going to really take it all, whoever's going to take the best nomination. For the upcoming debates we're going to see here next week. On the 25th is going to be the Hawaii primary. Then next Tuesday, it's going to be Super Tuesday. This is going to be huge. We see candidates from all over Missouri, California. These are going to be really big primary results that are really going to sway one way or the other who is going to take home this election. It's going to be really interesting. Then the New Jersey, as well as Pennsylvania and Iowa primaries are both next Friday, a week from today. It's going to be really big for them to see really this next week and a half, and especially how this primary debate goes, will sway a lot of different things going forward. But I think it's really going to be big to see here for who can really take home this election. There's still a lot of back and forth. I think Min Win is 100% by far the leading candidate for the Republicans. There's still 2 or 3 remaining for the Democrats here coming forward, but it's going to be a big thing to talk about going forward. We're going to take a quick break here on the WNN Pre-Debate Show. When we come back, we're going to talk to Luke Steiner, our Democratic analyst, and give a little bit more insight on how this Democratic race is running. Back here on the WNN Pre-Debate Show, I'm still your host, Jaden Taylor. Going to start off with Luke Steiner, our Democratic analyst. He's going to speak with Democratic National Chair Jaden Upton. Been a lot of movement back and forth with the Democratic race so far. There's still a lot of speculation of who can take this one home, and there's really a lot of pressure for some of those bottom groups here, bottom campaigns that maybe even drop out within these next couple weeks. So, Luke, I'm going to give it over to you. I mean, this is going to be a really big debate that we're going to see here just in a moment.
Thanks, Jaden. Yeah. Like you said, there's been a lot of back and forth between Waukee Stacy and Preister. Little bit of LaFata in there too. So yeah, I'm here with Jaden Upton, the Democratic National Chair. So I want to start off by asking. There seems to be a lot of conflict in both the Republicans and Democratic Party, both online, and there seems to be some in-person conflict as well. So I want to ask what you saw as the largest points of conflict.
The largest points of conflict. There's obviously a lot of different. I feel like some stuff is getting blown out of proportion in terms of like what people are saying about what's going on. I really do feel like there might have been some disagreements here and there, but when you're on that social media platforms and stuff like that, you can really blow those Twitter beefs, I guess you can call them, just like really out of proportion and hear a bunch of different views on like what exactly is going down. And so really the main point of conflict is seeing what's true, what's not.
Are there two candidates you think are having the most conflict?
I feel like right now it's just a little bit of that like disagreement between Republicans and Democrats and really trying to see like where that line is drawn between like what we have in common and what we don't.
What about within the Democratic Party?
Within the Democratic Party, I feel like all of them are handling it pretty well. I don't see a whole lot of animosity between any of them. I do feel like they are a little bit nervous with like the way this race is going and just like how many times you're switching that power shift. But other than that, I think everything's going pretty all right.
So you have a couple different candidates as far as social media presence and the conflict that they're trying to start. You have Waukee, Stacy, and Preister more active on social media, as well as the LaFada campaign kind of joining in these last couple of weeks, throwing themselves out there to sort of attack other candidates. But then you also have the Barros campaign, which has sort of stayed more quiet. They're more keeping to themselves, not posting a lot on social media. Do you think that's a specific tactic that you think is going to help them pull ahead in the long run? Maybe staying out of the conflict will catch some people's attention, or do you think in the end that's not the smartest move by the Barros campaign?
I think with how little they're doing on social media, I feel like that's really putting a detriment on just how much they're getting themselves out there. Because really, in the end, it's a lot about like how well you're seen out in the world, like how well people know you. And if they're not getting involved at all, really, it's going to start causing some problems. I think getting involved a little bit to discuss those problems between other candidates is all right. You just need to make sure that you're not going too out of the way and start saying information that's faulty.
So which candidate do you see right now as being the most prominent, most promising, and most prominent, most out there?
The one who I would say is out there the most, like in the social media platform of things, I would say is the Jimmy Waukee Stacy campaign. I do feel like they are just, his campaign team is really good about like using the platform to really communicate what their views are and stuff like that. But Cade Preisters and Luca Lafada's are going pretty well as well.
Do you think the Waukee Stacy campaign can find themselves in some trouble for over putting out content, maybe lose some people for some of the ads they've put out, or just kind of wear their supporters out? Do you think that's possible?
I think that can be a pretty possible scenario. I feel like sometimes you start putting out information just for the sole ability to put it out there, and so you might run into times when you're saying stuff that you might contradict later on without realizing it.
So who do you think out of the Democratic candidates has been the most controversial, whether that's between what polling numbers they're getting or just policy-based the most controversial?
So I feel like there have been some policies put out by all of the candidates that aren't too drastic, they aren't too radical. But I also feel like there were some campaign videos, campaign ads that were put out that might be a little bit over the top. Specifically, some of the ones dealing with like taking care of your children from the Gabe Barros campaign. I feel like some people might have taken that a little bit in the wrong direction and might see that as something that's not too promising.
So have you seen negative feedback from an ad like that?
I have not seen too much of it. I feel like it did spark a conversation, which is really good for his campaign and what they're doing there. But
Right, good press, or any press is good press.
Correct.
So what we've seen here is that the Waukee Stacy campaign and the Preister campaign are really pulling ahead in most polls. But in our surveys, it seems that the LaFada campaign is the most trusted for knowing his policies and having a plan. So why do you think there's that discrepancy there where even though LaFada is the most prepared, he seems to be falling behind?
I think that's once again one of those things about getting your name out there and actually being there with the people. I've seen how these different these different campaign teams like interact with their people and stuff like that. And I feel like Luca's really driving the ability to talk about the problems that he has, but maybe not necessarily opening up the time to talk with the people about them and get their feedback.
Okay, I just have one more question for you. As a party, the Republican Party has had some issues with a lot of controversy, and there's been accusations of shady business, both between candidates and between the RNC and some campaigns. So as a party, how are you combating controversy?
As a party, how we're combating controversy, I am, at least in what I'm doing, is I'm trying to remain as neutral as I can with all of the candidates and what they're doing. I'm also keeping an open mind to hearing about different policies and how we might enact those and how those would work out. and going off of that, supplying each party with as much as I can financially if they need it.
Okay. Can you tell us which candidate you've supported the most so far?
The two candidates that I've both supported them about the same amount. It was the Lafada campaign and the Waukee Stacy campaign. I've given them about the same amount of money, and I've also talked most with them closely because they've come to me about questions about policies and enacting those and how those might work.
All right, with that, I'm going to throw it back to Jaden Taylor to see the RNC's point of view.
A really big thing for the Democrats going forward, really how can Jimmy Waukee Stacy continue this momentum, especially with a lot of really big primaries coming up. Now we're going to talk with Ben Kutler, filling in today for Will Christensen, who is our Republican analyst. Ben, there's a lot of things going on with this Republican Party, a lot of things very recently that's been going on with the Republican Party. I think there's been a lot to be talked about with Republican National Chair Lucas Sokolik.
Yep. I'm right here with you, JT. We got a lot of things to talk about. And we're running a little bit short on time, so we'll make some of these quick. So first off, Lucas, as JT was saying, New Hampshire had a poor turnout, to say the least, for the Republicans. What can you explain about that situation, having 0 Republican voters?
Okay, so in New Hampshire is an extremely blue state. We knew that. I had, between me, Min, and all the other people who are running campaigns, we basically decided that there was probably only about 2 people in New Hampshire who might be voting Republican. And with primary elections, turnout is usually really, really low. So it doesn't surprise me that those 2 people didn't show up. Me and Min, we both made attempts to get the 2 Republicans in that class to vote, but they ended up deciding not to, and that's not my issue at the moment. My issue right now is preparing Republicans to win the general election. And so therefore, New Hampshire, I wouldn't see that as too big of a deal right now.
Alrighty. So secondly, you know, and most of this class knows, Matz has dropped out of the race. Mm-hmm. This is a huge deal because she was basically she was about second place behind Min. I mean, Min's obviously been dominating, but she was Min's main competition. So what does Matz dropping out mean for Min? What does this mean for the Republican Party as a whole?
Well, I mean, I think Matz did a very good job on her campaign. I have spoken to her. I spoke to her before she announced her campaign. I'm sorry that it didn't go too well for her, but I think that's fine. Her dropping out, I don't think it changes that much because I think Min is doing really, really well. Min is performing very, very well. He's impressing a lot of people, including myself. So I don't think Matt's dropping out affects who's going to probably win this primary.
Okay, so on top of Matt, Nick Lunger has also been rumored to be dropping out, maybe even after this debate. So what have you heard about that? Have you heard anything about that? And again, what does that mean for this Republican Party?
So with Nick, Nick hasn't won any delegates yet. We know that. That's information that's out. Nick, some people were also not satisfied with how Nick's made himself look during the debate. I think that I would have liked to have seen more of Nick Lunger, but it seems like if things aren't working out, I don't know if he's planning on dropping out or not. I can't confirm or deny that. I just know that no matter what he does, the RNC is going to be working with him to make sure that we have good voter turnout in California. We need to win California. The unified opposition needs to win California both for presidential general election and for House of Representatives. And I look forward to working with Min and his campaign, no matter how his future of his campaign looks.
Awesome. So lastly here, we've been hearing about some back and forth between you and the front runner Min Win. Rumors have said that you are choosing not to endorse him, and that the reasoning behind that might be you're not endorsing him until he's vaccinated, or has something to do with COVID protocols, either vaccination or his poor mask-wearing habits. Do you have anything to add on to this? Are these rumors true?
So I have had discussions with all of the candidates in this race about their image, about like general policy, about other things. I don't think they're the business of the press. They aren't official. You shouldn't. I'm not going to confirm or deny anything you said. I just know that I think that I recommend the vaccine to all of my friends, and to any of my friends that are not vaccinated, I always recommend they get that. I think it's safe and effective, but if at the end of the day one of my friends or one of my colleagues or one of my voters, they decide not to, I don't want to force them to get the vaccine unless for sure not by the federal government, for sure not by any government. That should be, it's an individual's choice, it's a business's choice, and at the end of the day, you have to make a rational decision as an individual.
All right. Thank you for your time, Lucas.
That will end our pre-debate show here today. Next up, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, your live action of today's WNN primary debate.
get started here with our Republican primary debate, and we'll have you go ahead and take it away.
Happy Friday, everybody. Today we're going to be having let's get some claps. All right, today we're going to be having some speaking from our expected Republican candidate for president, Min Wen. We're all, including myself, everybody's really excited to hear what he has to say today. I just thought I would give everybody a heads up, talk about a few things. While this presidential election is very flashy, it's very cool, we cannot forget about the congressional elections. Those are just as important, and everybody who I've endorsed, or I still have to endorse, you are just as important as good old Min Wen. So, if you are in a state and you have a Republican running for Congress, get out and vote for them, get out and support them, and let's win this election for Republicans. And I would like to introduce Min Wen.
All right. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to thank Mr. Wen for gracing us with your presence today. There are rumors of Republican candidates challenging out there, however, we don't see them today. So we'd like to thank you for showing up. And I'd like to remind the audience to keep their voices down so we can hear Min as we conduct this forum to get to understand the presumptive Republican nominee for president, get to know him a little better. Is that okay with you today, Mr. Wen? Okay, Mr. Wen, I'd like to start off by actually talking to you about something that your Democrats counterparts have liked to talk about. Many of them enjoy talking about race, equality, but do you think that maybe because of your background that you might actually be more capable of being empathetic and understanding these issues than even your Democratic opponents could be?
I think being a first-generation immigrant, I think I have a unique perspective in the way that minorities feel in the workplace or in school. With that being said, I think that all the Democratic candidates are willing and want to push for equality for all Americans. With that being said, I think that my perspective will allow me to see things from the other side and do what's best for them.
Recently, former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice said that she thinks the key is to empowering people of color without making white children feel the guilt of past sins of their fathers. Do you agree with this statement, or would you have a different opinion on the matter?
I do agree with the statement. So I've heard from some Democratic candidates that they are in favor of reparations to Black Americans for slavery. Now, the issue with that I hold is I don't believe it's right to punish the sons and daughters for the sins of their parents. I don't think that reparations are feasible, and I don't think that it's morally right to force Americans here, who I suppose everyone here is against slavery, to pay reparations. With that being said, I know Mr. Williams here wants reparations, but there's some logistical issues that come with that. For example, if someone is half African, a quarter, will they receive half the reparations, a quarter of the reparations? I don't really know, and it's something that I think it's just unfeasible.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to just have one more question on this topic before we move on. There are a number of people of color in this country who don't feel that they're getting a fair shake from the police. There's also a lot within your party that think it's very important to support the police. Where do you stand on funding, defunding, supporting, and not supporting the police, and also supporting all people in this country?
You know, I think there's a lot of good cops, and there's some bad cops. I think, well, if we look at the training schedule of police officers, in the police academy, police officers only receive less than 80 hours of firearms training. It's not much. They receive less than 40 hours of de-escalation training, and they receive less than 28 hours of physical combatives, physical combatives training. I think we should divert more funding, and I know this goes against what a lot of people believe. I think to increase the quality of policing here in America, we need to divert more funding to police training and so switch the idea to increase the quality of police officers. Like for example, in the police department of Seattle, there are currently 1,300 police officers. Now with recent cabinet moves, they've laid off 400 of those police officers. So they've lost a third of their enforcement strength. That means that their resources will be further strained. And currently in Seattle, the law enforcement response time right now on one call is over 60 minutes. So I think that we need to increase funding and training and hold police to a higher standard and hold individuals who chose to become police officers and go through that training to a higher standard.
Thank you very much, sir. Of course, one advantage that police have in these situations is that they have guns. In doing some research, we found that that's actually a topic that comes up when we talk to voters about you. One person said, "Isn't he a gun nut?" Another said, "That dude loves guns." And one other person said, "I love it, he's a Second Amendment guy." I have three questions. Are you a Second Amendment guy? Are you a gun nut? Do you love guns?
I believe that the Second Amendment is an inalienable right, no doubt, but with rights come responsibility. In any situation that warrants the use of a gun owner is legally and morally liable for every round of discharge. There's very little room, very little margin for error with firearms. That being said, I think that all firearm owners should be trained, familiar, and responsible with guns. I want safe and legal, responsible gun use. I believe that there will always be evil in the world, and that attempting to restrict the tools in which evil is carried out will be futile. Cities like Baltimore, Detroit, New York, and Chicago, they have the toughest gun crimes in the country, but lead in the number of violent crimes. And upwards of 70% of firearms used in crimes are, one, stolen, or two, illegally acquired in some other manner. So which completely defeats the purpose of that in the first place. So, just from those numbers there, I don't believe that further restriction of gun rights will do anything to help the American people.
Along those lines then, keeping in mind what you just said, what is your plan to stop gun violence specifically in schools? I know parents across the country, especially before COVID-19, listed that as one of their highest fears of sending their children to school was being involved in a mass shooting. Do you think as president you can have some role in stopping, slowing, decreasing the amount of gun violence in schools?
There's the mantra, a mass shooting only lasts as long as it takes to get there. As we saw in Oklahoma yesterday, there was a shooting at a mall, and that shooter was put down by a large citizen. I believe that for teachers or staff members who want to seek out training and proper qualification for firearms, they should be allowed to carry firearms or even less legal means to protect themselves and their students.
Okay, thank you very much. Speaking of schools, you'll notice around here today, most if not all of us are wearing masks. You have been contacted by at least one teacher asking you to, quote, pull your mask up. Do you believe that masks work?
I am not a doctor. But with that being said, there's so much, there's so much discrepancy and distrust with media and quote-unquote science, I suppose. So with that being said, I believe that proper N95 and proper surgical masks do work, but the effectiveness of masks degrades the quality of masks. I don't believe cloth masks or any sort of non-medically produced mask is as effective as the N95 or sort of other respiratory.
Are we as a society in general and as a government, are we overreacting to this pandemic right now?
I think that I would believe that individuals should be left up to make their decisions about their health and about COVID. I don't think that the government can be trusted to handle such a monumental responsibility. I don't think that the government can make blanket regulations and laws in regards to individual health in that sense.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to move on to foreign policy, something I know near and dear to your heart. What do you believe would be the theme of your foreign policy if you became president of the United States?
As it currently stands, we have over 150 military installations around the world. With that being said, that allows us to use the military as a bargaining chip, a tool on the world stage. We can quickly deploy our military as a quick reaction force around the world within 18 hours. And I believe that that's important to protect our own interests, our allies, and help in humanitarian aid, such as, for example, in 1993, there was the Somali genocide. We sent, if you've ever seen the movie Black Hawk Down, we sent Task Force Ranger and other special operations units to go and deal with these warlords in Somalia and South genocide that killed hundreds of thousands of Somalis. Now, with that being said, specifically, I know that a great concern right now is with the threat of China. China has been extremely aggressive in the southeast region, in the South China Sea, expanding their naval and military power, and threatening countries like Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea, our allies. So I believe that we should maintain a military presence in those highly contested regions to protect our allies, our self-interests, and to act as a deterrent for the aggression.
Do you think that terrorism should still be in the forefront for our foreign policy?
Sorry, say that again, Mr. Brown?
Do you think that terrorism should still be one of the main topics that we think of when we think of foreign policy in this country?
I think terrorism is a legitimate concern. With that being said, I think that the current U.S. Special Operations Command, U.S. Special Operations Command, have the resources they need to combat terrorism around the world through U.S. Special Operations, whether it be CAG, Central Ranger Regiment, or the Naval Development.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask you kind of a more local question, Min? One of the number one complaints of students when the survey was sent out a few years ago about Westside High School was the cleanliness of bathrooms. Bathrooms around here can get pretty nasty. Furthermore, a recent TikTok, which apparently is a thing, challenge asked students to destroy bathrooms. Furthermore, a common teacher complaint is that some students seem to have an odor that's not that good sometimes. Do you have any advice for keeping the bathrooms clean, keeping ourselves clean, and keeping our bathrooms safe?
Let's realize something that we all share the same bathrooms. I think it's pretty irresponsible to destroy the bathrooms. I know there might open lives, crazy bathrooms, and it's really annoying. There's no toilet paper, the sink is missing, or the soap is missing. So I think we'd all really appreciate it. The bathrooms stay intact. In terms of odor, I use Pure Sport. What's the deodorant brand?
Old Spice.
Old Spice, thank you. I use Old Spice, and then Armand. With that being said, I think that if we take hours today, to curb this whole issue.
Okay, thank you so much. I know there's some people out there that will appreciate that advice. Thank you so much. I want to talk to you about one more thing maybe before we start looking at a commercial break, and that is the economy. Recently, Pete Buttigieg said that part of the reason that we are having such supply shortage problems is that Joe Biden has been too good at reviving our economy. Because he has been so successful at reviving our economy, we're having supply chain issues. Do you think this is really a problem, or is there something else to blame?
I don't think that is true necessarily. If we look at the last 12 months, there has been there's a 4.8% or 4.8% unemployment rate. And with that being said, inflation on the rise. It went in the last 10 months from 3.4% to 4.2%. It is expected to go up another 1.8% in the next 10 months. With that being said, there's also an increase of imports from other countries, but we're exporting less. That means we're making less money. The economy isn't growing as we'd like it to be. So, with that being said, I don't think the judge is correct in the assumption. And I also think that it would be a top priority for us to boost the economy and jumpstart it.
All right, with that being said, I'm just going to give you 30 seconds, a minute here, to remind everyone why they should vote for you for President of the United States and for the Republican nominee for President of the United States.
So as you all know, my slogan is win for president is a win for America. Right? It's not win for president is a win for the Republicans or a defeat for the Democrats. I'm not interested in splitting parties here. I want to see a united political front here at Westside High School and here in America. So with that being said, I think that I can best represent the interests of both Democrats, moderates, and Republicans if I'm elected. And also on a side note, I'd like to congratulate Thomas Page, Elizabeth Mance, and Nick Lunger for their awesome campaigns. I had a lot of fun with them. Also, I'd like to wish Nick Lunger a happy birthday. We've been friends for a long time. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time today.
Give him a hand. Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Williams.
Imagine a perfect world. This is what we'll get if Jimmy Stacey becomes the president. Well, I am a famous public figure, Ben Shapiro. Imagine a perfect world. This is what we'll get if Jimmy Stacey becomes the president. Jimmy promises to solve racism and end poverty within his first 10 days in office. Some people will not vote for Jimmy because of his many scandals. Like when he used the bathroom and didn't wash his hands. Or when he refused to kiss a baby because it was too ugly. There was also the time when he was caught bullying a little kid for no reason. But Jimmy apologized for all of these things. But Democrats, Jimmy has great policies. Trust me, I would know. And Ben Shapiro, after all. Jimmy Stacey. A campaign with a fire. A campaign for all people. Do you really want to kill John Stamos?
You've all heard Cade Fleischner slowly meditating with his unruly mouth. Cade's depraved reign in our country has gone on long enough. Cade betrayed American values with his fear-based propaganda and emotional manipulation. Fleischner for progress? More like Fleischner for pig-headed pessimism. Stop these captured ideas before it's too late. End Cade's crusade.
Big body Ben, remember I used to be dusty. Big body Ben, remember I used to be dusty. Big body Ben, remember I used to be dusty. Big body Ben, remember I used to be dusty.
Someone said America's issues can be fixed, that left and right have gone too far apart. Well, I don't believe that. Together, we can mend the divide and save the nation. So, join me in the fight for America.
And I endorse Ben for president.
Transition to have the Democrats come on up stage. So Democrats, come on up. And then Aiden, you're gonna have your introduction.
Hello.
All right, good morning and welcome to our continuation of the presidential primaries. We are now on to the Democratic section, and this will be one of our last debates we see from the Democrats before a lot of us start heading out to the polls. And in fact, I'm pretty sure it's our last one face-to-face. So, with that being said, please join me in welcoming Gabe Burrows from Washington, Luca Lavana from Missouri, Kate Chrysler from Texas, and Jimmy Watkins Stacy from Iowa. Let's take it away, Mr. Brennan.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome you all today. Thank you so much for being here and letting these voters become more informed and able to cast a well-educated vote. Mr. Watkins Stacy, I'd like to begin with you. You've recently been endorsed by Ben Shapiro. Some of your colleagues on the left have called him unhinged, racist, horrible, and scary. Do you feel awkward receiving a endorsement from such a figure?
I would find it interesting because my policies are not in line with him whatsoever. So I don't accept his endorsement at all. In fact, I denounce his policies consistently, and I don't believe that his endorsement is genuine.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you clearing that up for everyone. The campaign has really heated up, not only with the Ben Shapiro endorsement, Mr. Preissner, but also some people using some very good alliteration to attack your campaign, calling you a pig-headed pessimist and asking them to end Cade's crusade. What do you say to these people that say you're a pig-headed pessimist?
Yeah, I think they did a very good job on the ad quality, but I think that my ad wasn't fear-mongering. I think that that's just how important and how vital the climate change. We just need to just get on it immediately, and we can't just sit around and wait. So I don't think that it was fear-mongering. I think that it was perfectly appropriate.
Okay, thank you very much. Now looking over here at the other side of the podium, Luca, Gabe, people have lauded your guys' ability to know the issues, however, I should say, it seems that your campaigns are not getting the traction that maybe some others are. Do you think now is the time that your campaign is going to turn things around? And if so, why? Either one of you take this one first.
Yeah, I think that up here I have an opportunity to talk about my main issues, and then I think that if people really listen to what I have to say, it kind of makes a lot of sense for people.
I've said it before and I'll say it again, I have the best people, I have the best plans, and I realize that I can be awkward and kind of, I don't know, adult-like, but I'm trying to relate to you guys and trying to just tell you about what I believe in and how I want to do it. That being said, if you want some good entertainment, you can go to my Twitter page and check out my pretty fire memes that I created.
I'd like to remind the crowd to refrain from cheering until the end. Thank you very much. Mr. Preissner, I spoke to a high-ranking official of the Democratic Party today. Received quite lashing for not giving you guys enough opportunities to talk about healthcare in the previous debate. So here's your opportunity. Is healthcare an important plank in your platform? And if so, what are your plans for improving American healthcare?
I definitely have a plan for healthcare. I think that so many countries that are already developed already have this universal healthcare set in place for all of their citizens. And I think that America needs to give it the times and put in, even if it's bare bones, just a universal healthcare plan, just so that private healthcare providers are forced to give more benefits and better things to their clients.
Mr. Waukee Stacy, does your plan differ from that at all?
I support the vast expansion of Obamacare. I think it was a great start, but we need to improve healthcare in our country because as it stands, people can't afford the care that they're receiving. I also believe that we could still allow private insurance, but allowing a public option for healthcare would greatly reduce premiums for everyone. And that's just using capitalism for our advantage. We can use a public health option while using private insurance to allow for that free choice of what kind of healthcare you want.
Can I answer your question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there any particular reason why you don't support a universal healthcare system in opposed to just a private sector?
I think switching to a full single-payer healthcare system at this time would cause a lot of worry in the public, and I don't think that we need to switch to an entirely new system in order to solve these problems. I think we can solve these problems through including a public option while also allowing private insurance companies.
I think it's for sure necessary. Private insurance companies are essentially a middleman. They stand between you and the hospital, and what they do is they make the cost way higher than it needs to be for healthcare. And by eliminating that, would actually make the cost a lot cheaper, and while also providing healthcare for thousands of people. So universal healthcare for me is kind of a no-brainer. Both save lives and save money.
I agree with Jimmy, first of all, with the Medicare for All Who Wanted system. So that if you want to buy into private insurance, that is your choice. If you want to go down that route and deal with the middleman, as Dave has said, you can do that. But my plan would be to simply expand Medicare from the current age of 65 all the way down to 0, so that all American citizens can have access to that health care that they need from the moment that they are born in this country, and so that everyone can benefit from it. And that private insurance route also leads to a flourishing in the market where the private insurance companies have to now compete with the government. And healthcare is a human right, so that the government needs to be able to provide that plan. But now these private insurance people, if you want to have private insurance, then these private insurance companies are going to have to start competing with the government. They're either going to have to adapt or they're going to die out.
I'm gonna let Jimmy put a bow on this before we move to our next topic.
While I admire what Gabe is proposing, we don't know how that would work on the scale of the United States. That we would be the largest country in the world to implement that kind of system, and we don't know exactly how that would work and how much that would cost in that switch. Americans are tired of paying such high prices for healthcare, but I don't think that we can switch at this time, especially in the last couple of years with so much uncertainty with health.
Thank you so much. Gabe, I'm going to come over to you, and we're going to switch to foreign policy, another topic that maybe hasn't come up as much in the Democratic campaign. What do you think is the biggest challenge in foreign policy today for the United States?
Well, I think that there's a number of domestic issues that should take precedence over foreign policy issues. I think our biggest foreign policy issue right now is that we are too involved in other countries. For example, the war in Afghanistan. Over the 20 years that we were there, we've spent over $2 trillion funding the war. To kind of put that into perspective, free college for everyone would cost around $60 billion. And we spent $2 trillion for basically nothing, wasted. And I think that money could go towards helping our country.
If I could talk about foreign policy for a second. I do believe that foreign policy is actually a very big issue that Americans should care about, because the fact is, if you live in America, you also live within the wider world, and there are so many different countries and so many different people out there that we should be talking to and trying to figure out how to deal with. So, first of all, the greatest foreign policy challenge that I see in our day is China. And the reason for this is because their growing authoritarian tendencies and their growing influence and clamping down on economic markets and the internet and forcing their citizens into these daily lives and daily routines monitored by the Chinese government through the social credit score. I don't know if you know what that is. It's the way that the Chinese government measures how good you are as a Chinese citizen. And if your score falls too low, bad things can happen to you. Now, the way that we do this, in my plan, is to reenact a form of the Marshall Plan, where countries around the world can come to us, and if they want to, we will not be meddling in other countries, but if they want to, they can get aid and they can get assistance from us, and we can help the world and show them an alternative as well.
Thank you very much. Mr. Preissner, could you please give us your stance on all these issues mentioned by the candidates to your right?
Just those issues?
Whatever you want. You're the guy.
Well, because I think that one of the biggest issues, we're out of Afghanistan. I don't plan to send troops back there. But I think that the biggest issue that we're facing right now is denuclearization in North Korea and Iran. Because I think that we need to be able to take steady steps that doesn't, so that we can prevent hostility from those countries, because they're really close to our allies, such as South Korea or Japan. And I think their ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons are within range of the U.S. So I think that saving civilian lives takes priority over those two issues. And I think that we need to have steady relations, take small steps with North Korea, Kim Jong-un, and Iran, and shutting down their ballistic missiles and nuclear programs.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Mr. Stacy.
On foreign policy, I'm frankly tired of needless wars. I think that we're spending way too much money on wars that we should not be in. For example, the Gulf War, that was not our business. We shouldn't have been involved in a war that was not involved with us. We shouldn't be in making ourselves be this epicenter of war in the world. And that's where we stand today. I also believe that we need to improve diplomacy. We can't just flex our muscles whenever there's a threat. We need to be able to talk these issues out with these countries like China and Iran and North Korea, instead of just trying to overpower them.
May I quickly respond to Jimmy's comment? On your comment on the Gulf War, I agree with you that we do not need needless wars, but the fact is that the Gulf War was an instance in 1991 where Iraq and Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait and was threatening the people of Kuwait simply to gain access to their immense oil fields. Now, what George H.W. Bush is he launched I believe it was 8-month campaign into Iraq to be able to push back Saddam Hussein from terrorizing and killing the Kuwaiti people. And we lost 300 soldiers. And while that is a horrible loss, and those are men and women that we will never get back, it was, in my opinion, one of the best ways that the United States military has been used in recent years.
To be clear, the Gulf War did have a major impact on terrorism in the Middle East, and I think that was a major misstep in H.W. Bush's administration. We didn't need to be there, frankly. The reason why we need to be there was strictly for oil. If we weren't so reliant on Middle Eastern oil, we wouldn't need to have been involved. And I think that is the major problem, not the reason why we went wasn't for human rights, it was for oil.
I'll let you respond quickly to this if you'd like to, and then we'll move on to our next topic.
Mr. Stacy, while I know that your view is that the Americans were only there for oil, but the fact is, we saved a lot of people in that war. A lot of people who would have died under the boot of Saddam Hussein. Now, while what came afterwards and what happened before may be questionable, America has a very storied and scarred past within the Middle East. I believe that for one shining moment, that Gulf War was an example of America at its best.
Okay, thank you. I know you have more to say on this, but we'll let him put the bow on it this time. Mr. Price, we'll go to you and then we'll go to Gabe about this. And really, this is something for all of you to think about. In a recent town hall, the Republican presumptive nominee, Min Nguyen, said something to the effect of a lot of the Democrat candidates, they mean well, they talk about race, they talk about equality, but he says, I've lived it, I'm an immigrant. I have the experiences that are going to help me to empathize with all sides in America. What's your response to that? We'll start with you, Mr. Price, and we'll move to Gage and keep the rest of you in on this.
I think that I'm honestly the most electable candidate on the stage, just because of my broader view of policies, and I think I can win over Republican voters a lot better than my candidates who are a little bit more radical on the Democratic side. I still hold true Democratic policies, but I also think I can appeal to a lot vaster wave of voters throughout America, and I think that I could be a better Democratic candidate in the race against Min Nguyen.
I think that my policies are not for Republicans or Democrats, but they're for all the people. For example, I mean, everyone needs health care. It's not a Republican or Democrat issue. And I think that we need to start kind of drawing lines and just try to benefit people as a whole.
Go ahead, Mr. Lugo.
While my ideas may be, in your view, a bit more radical, progressive policies create progress for everyone, no matter what color you have on your button on your jacket, or what cable news channel you tune into. You will still feel the benefits of these policies.
Mr. Waukee Stacy.
As the other two candidates have said, my policies aren't radical. I believe that the working class should have a place at the table, and I don't think that they have that right now. The only people I'm against aren't Republicans. I'm against corporations, and I'm against people that exploit labor and exploit people and exploit the environment. I'm not for just democratic policies, I'm for progressive policies that will move our country forward.
What about his claim that his status as an immigrant gives him a greater sense of empathy compared to maybe some on this stage?
So I am openly gay, as many of you know. I also have, my entire campaign is for women, which that's a small part of why I believe that I do have a unique perspective on policy, but I also know that there are multiple sides to issues, and I will listen to other people's problems. I've debated men outside of this race before. We talked about issues before. I understand where it comes from, and I don't want to just trample on other people.
Okay, thank you very much. Luca, let's go to you with a question a little bit about police. What are some changes that you would make, if any, regarding to criminal justice and police reform in this country?
Well, I believe the first thing that we need to do is, the conversation keeps revolving around funding the police, defunding the police, all these different things. And my view is that we should be reallocating funds. Not defunding, not funding, but reallocating funds so that we create a new kind of police. One that serves people. You can still have beat cops with pistols and body armor, but they need training, and they need sensitivity training, and they need de-escalation training, and they need to know when, at the absolute worst case scenario, to use those firearms. But the fact is that police departments are currently having way too much funding going towards extreme levels of riot gear and rifles and shotguns and all sorts of things that I don't believe a police department would need. And the fact is that in order to solve the police, we have to talk to the people who are most affected adversely by it.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Preissler, would you like to comment on that?
I think there's been far too many tragedies from Rodney King in 1991 all the way to George Floyd in 2019. And I just think that we need to hold our cops to a higher standard, and they need more mental training, and they need a lot more, as well as physical training. And I just think that we spend over $100 billion consistently on the police force. And I think crime rates have gone down in the past years. And I think we can put this money somewhere else where it can do good. Maybe in our social workers, that could be good. And I think that, yeah, that would be great.
But
as it stands, the police forces in America have too many military-grade weapons, like Luca has said. I believe we need to end that deal with the federal government in getting older military-grade weapons to police forces. We have National Guards that would be able to handle more difficult situations. Regular police forces don't need military-grade weapons, and I think that's a big problem in our country, and I think that that's an easy solution. I also think that I don't want to defund the police or vastly increase the funding. I think that they have the right amount of funding. It just needs to be reallocated, like Lucas said. I think it needs to be put towards more training rather than weapons and gear.
okay, thank you very much. I'd like to thank you all for that first segment of informed analysis from all four of you. We will now be taking a break for some brief commercials. We'll come back with a few more questions and the closing statements. You guys can give them a hand now.
people don't know. Hey, look at the Lapana. That's home. What is one thing that people don't know about you?
Well, my dad was from Italy and my mom was from Spain, and they came here looking for a better life.
Favorite place to view art?
Really just out here. Our planet and our nature that we have. What we could have asked for. And we need to protect it. That's why my campaign was a plan to combat climate change.
Best compliment you've ever received?
That I was the most fit to be president. I got the best plans, I got the best people. You know I stayed at Houston.
Weirdest word in the English language?
Democracy, because it's something that all these campaigns promise, but some of them just can't deliver.
Hi, I'm former Westside president Jaden Taylor, and I support gay boroughs for president. You know, for one. Oh. Hey, I need to call you, bro. Hold on. Yo, what up, kid? Dude, I need some of that healthcare real quick. I need some of that healthcare. Bro, I need some of that good, some of that universal. Come on. Alright.
That was a close one. Good thing the US has universal healthcare. Oh wait.
There are 28 million Americans living without health insurance because of the insane high rates. What are they supposed to do in my situation? Just let her die? This is common sense, guys. Healthcare is a human right, not a privilege. It is immensely unjust to deny healthcare to anybody simply because of economic circumstances that are often out of their control. Gabe Burrows is your candidate to stand up for human rights. A vote for Gabe is a vote for you.
We're facing a really large threat in the West when it comes to droughts and wildfires, and we should be listening to indigenous communities because they managed our forests and those rivers for millennia before we came here. They know what we should be doing, and we should listen to them and allow them to have their input. For the southeastern United States, hurricanes are becoming increasingly common. These will not go away, and they will become more common as time goes on. We need to learn how to adapt and overcome these challenges in order to fight against climate change.
God! When did I ever use this stuff? I just think the school system caters to students like myself with more creative minds. I'm not like these nerds. Who are you, sir?
I'm the most electable candidate in this race, Kate Priester. If I'm elected, I'll make sure that every student has equal opportunities within American schools.
College workers, that's unradical.
And remember, vote Priester for progress.
What's up? It's Cole Payton. You better vote for Kate Priester.
Genevieve's here. You better vote Priester for progress.
Welcome back. Gabe, I'd like to start with you as we move on. We got a couple more topics to discuss before we get to our final statements. The Supreme Court has become something that's in the news quite a bit lately, from hearing cases about gay marriage, to abortion, to campaign finance. Do you think that the Supreme Court has become too political? And if so, what's your plan to fix this?
Yeah, like I've said before, I think it's wrong for the president to be able to support, or rather, put in power Supreme Court justices who will blatantly support their policies. I think it's something that there should be a vote on for the people. It's like any other election, just because Supreme Court is just as powerful as the president, and I don't think that it's right for it to be biased.
So just to be clear, you believe that we should amend the Constitution to provide for the direct election of U.S. Supreme Court justices. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a radical change, but I think it's the right thing to do.
Okay, I'd like to hear from someone that either endorses or does not endorse this plan.
I think that amending, I don't think that that's necessary to amend renounce the amendment. I think that it's best just to, as president, in the executive branch, keep the judicial branch the least political branch as it should be, because it should be fair for everyone. And if I'm elected and I get the opportunity to appoint someone, I'll make sure that they're moderate and stay unbiased to whatever political party that you belong to.
Okay, two widely different views here. Jimmy, what's your thoughts?
So I said this in the last debate. I would nominate a moderate voice to the Supreme Court if a seat were to open up. It starts with us. We can't just keep blaming the other side for politicizing the court while contributing to that politicization. If I were to nominate this super progressive voice, the next president that might be a Republican might nominate the most conservative justice they can. We need to be holding ourselves accountable in this situation. We can't just keep blaming the other side and hope that it solves itself.
So, Luca, not to set you up here, but I heard three candidates, none of them saying that they are going to guarantee to nominate a bedrock, hardcore Democrat into the Supreme Court. Would you be the one that would do that?
I would pick a justice that sees the Constitution the way the majority of the American people see it. That being said, this cycle of I'll nominate a moderate person, I can nominate a progressive, and then the next guy nominates a conservative. This cycle will continue whoever I pick. So there needs to be change to the system itself. Now, maybe not direct elections, but I think that simply putting term limits and having terms for Supreme Court justices would go a very long way in terms of reforming the system and creating a system that people like. That being said, there is also an idea that I believe I saw that I thought made sense, that there would be, and this is a bit of a long shot, but let's say there's 15 justices. 5 of them are permanent, selected nonpartisanly, perhaps by a commission. And then there's 5 on one side, 5 on the other side of whatever political persuasion. And then they would have to consult with each other, and ultimately those 5 chosen by the commission would be the deciding.
Okay, thank you very much for all your thoughts on the Supreme Court. I'd like to turn to the economy as we finish up here. We've heard a story from the past few years about how people are hurting. They're hurting from COVID. They're hurting from the economy. But many local people around the country have said whenever they drive around their towns, all they see are help wanted signs, help wanted signs, help wanted signs. What's the cause of that? Is that a problem? Can you please explain to me, we'll start with Jimmy here, explain to me what's going on, why are there so many people looking for workers.
We are seeing a major shift in our country right now. The working class has really woken up and realized that they don't want to be paid starvation wages. Federal minimum wage right now is $7.25. Now, in the cheapest state to live in, Mississippi, it costs more than $15,000. $15,000 is $725 over the course of the year. It costs more than that to live, pay rent, and pay for insurance and for car insurance. And that's how you're considering childcare if you have a child. So these are starvation wages. This is not feasible in any state. So that's why I think that we need to raise the minimum wage to at least $15 per hour. I also believe that we need to increase the number of unions in this country because the working class has to have a say. And as it stands, corporations are able to just trample on those voices.
I mean, I have to agree with Jimmy that people are being paid starvation wages, and there needs to be an increase in the minimum wage to $15 a living wage. And the reason for the worker shortage, you say that people are looking for work, but there's no work available, and it's a very interesting conundrum. The reason for that is because people are tired and they are fed up of being treated horribly by their employers and by society, and they need to be able to support themselves and to not just survive, but to be able to live. I mean, and this all it wasn't started by COVID, but it was exacerbated by COVID. When people saw Americans dying left and right all around them, they started to take a look inward at their own lives, and they realized they didn't want to work 50 hours a week and barely be able to afford preschool. It's unacceptable.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Barles, did you want to get in on this?
Yeah, I agree. I think that no one's trying to work minimum wage. You can't survive on it at all. We need to raise the minimum wage. An argument that some people will say against it is that it's usually like teenagers working minimum wage jobs, and it's just not true. You know, you go to a McDonald's, it's not a bunch of teenagers, it's adults with families and lives, and they're not being paid enough to live, and that's something that needs to be done.
All right, thank you very much. We are going to move towards our closing statements now. We will kind of start over here, and we will work this way. And I'd just like you to tell everyone why you're the person they should vote for in the Democratic primary.
You know, we've all made our cases up here, and you might think that I'm the most capable to get president, or you might not. But I think the most important thing is that you need to make your voice heard and get out and vote. It takes like 2 minutes, and no matter your political party or your background or anything, your voice deserves to be heard. And for those of you who have listened to what I have to say and think that my policies make sense for the people, sure support.
I've said it before, today even, and I'll say it again. I have the best plans, I have the best people, and I also have the best means. So I believe that if you're going to vote for anyone on this stage, I would recommend you to highly consider me as your choice, because I will be the best president out of these people here.
Mr. Breither.
If elected as your presidential candidate for the Democratic Party, I will work towards clean energy, providing jobs in these clean energy plants, doing all this throughout for climate change, to prevent it and preserve national parks. And I'll make sure everyone here, no matter your party or your status, that your ideas are heard and that you feel safe in America and with your families.
It's clear my messages are resonating with Democrats. We want fundamental change in America. It's time for corporations to pay their fair share. It's time for action on gun control, and it's time for action on climate change. Democrats want this, and they know that, and they know I'm the strongest voice as the nominee. I will be the strongest voice as the nominee to fight for those values.
All right, thank you very much. Please give them a hand.
You guys are good to go here. Mr. Bramley, thank you for moderating. We appreciate your help with this. Students, okay, you have a poll that you need to take. So all of your teachers have emailed you, and check your email. Take the polls for the debate, okay? So go ahead and take a moment to do that right now.
back here on the WNN Post-Debate Show. I'm your host, Jaden Taylor. It was a really good debate here. We saw it today, but the biggest news of the day, Min Win is officially running unopposed in the Republican primary coming up here in these next few weeks. The only odd thing to speak about here is that Elizabeth Mass, Thomas Pate, as well as Nicholas Lunger, all dropped out too late to be able to be taken off the upcoming ballots. There's been a lot of conversation back and forth. I talked to FEC header Mr. Bywater here today, and they really don't know what they're going to be looking to do. Although technically, if you want to talk about this in a real life situation, they might be able to stay. They should be able to still be on the ballot, even though they dropped out. A lot of information to go coming forward. A lot of back and forth too. So now I'm joined here by our Democratic analyst, Luke Steiner. And I know this is not quite your forte, but the biggest thing is, I really think the biggest thing to talk about today was the Republican back and forth, and really Min just being able to have an entire time to be able to talk about what he needs and get himself even more time to prepare for the general election. Does that hurt the Democrats? How does this help the Republicans?
I think the Republicans have I think Min has a lot of flaws as a candidate, but he does have the crowd support, especially from the Republicans. There's even Democrats who are supporting him. So I think him having this time to himself, and really, if you didn't know his name before, you really know it now. And having that time to just speak about his policies really helped him in the long run, or is going to help him in the long run. I do think that he dodged a lot of questions. In my opinion, he made a fool of himself with a lot of his answers.
I think the biggest thing here overall today is just going to be about Min's ability to stay on track. It's a break. On the WNN Post-Debate Show, we had a little bit of mix-up to start off this one, but I think the biggest thing here today to talk about is really how can this Democratic race finish. I think all candidates, or really the top three candidates other than really Gabe Barros, were really ones to talk and be a big presence here today. They all have votes. They all have shown somewhat of at least one leaning candidate or one leaning state here in the primaries. We're looking next Monday at Hawaii, and then Super Tuesday, of course, is just 4 days away. How much is this going to waver this entire Democratic election? How can this change things going forward?
I think the debate, the main thing, we're really at the same place with a lot of the candidates. I see Preister continuing on his path of a lot of crowd engagement, not super serious about the policies. I'm so sorry. Not super serious about the policies, but still working on that crowd engagement to take him really far. And then we also have Luca making the statement today that, I know he kind of spoke upon some of what people have said are his the weaker parts of his campaign, maybe that crowd engagement has been a little bit weaker for him. And he kind of spoke about that and is trying to recover that image, for the social media image, and adding, taking it less seriously, I think was the move he was going for to really get more crowd engagement. Other than that, I think the Watkey-Stacy campaign and the Preister campaign are pretty much in the same place they really were before.
So I think a big thing for Super Tuesday, what we're going to talk about, just as a whole, who can, I mean, I guess I'll rephrase my question here, but the biggest thought of this next week is going to be Super Tuesday. I mean, we talked about it in many elections before. This can be the point that can waver an election entirely differently. We saw that last year with the Aiden Karpf campaign. They won Super Tuesday heavily, and that's really what slingshotted them forward and to end up becoming the president of the United States last year. I think this year there's a lot closer of a couple candidates here for this group. What is the biggest piece, not only for the Democrats, but going forward in the general election as well, even though this might be a little bit of a close to call situation right now?
I think I first originally I thought Gabe Barros was going to be a Aiden Karpf situation. I really did. I thought he was going to be this underdog that really came through. And as the weeks go on, as the debates continue and the polls go out, I see that happening less and less, unfortunately. I think Barros has a lot of strong policies. He's one of the candidates that's taken the policies and his plans more seriously, much like the LaFata campaign. But what he's lacking from the LaFata campaign is just that image out there. There's been a lack of press. There's been a lack of social media presence. And he's lacking a lot of that crowd engagement. I really think it's just the press is, LaFata has really taken on any press is good press. Most of the press has been positive for the LaFata campaign, but he's not afraid to really get out there, start attacking candidates, and get some press time. So I don't think we're going to have this underdog story that we had last year, and I really think it's going to come down to the Watkey-Stacy campaign and the Preister campaign. So I think it's going to look much different than it did last year.
Yeah, this debate is especially becoming, I don't want to say less involved with the policies as much, but a lot of times less serious, as sometimes the show has even been here today. But I think the biggest thing going forward for this group, what is the biggest thing to help them in the general election? Or what is the biggest thing for men to even have a chance in the general election? With our recent poll, show that we have just under 70% of our recent voters are registered as Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, like I've said this whole time, really crowd engagement, that social media presence, those are your main things. Quite frankly, I think that's all that really Min has. I think his policies are extremely flawed. A lot of people don't agree with his plans as far as gun control, abortion policies, immigration policies. They seem to really be lacking, especially the COVID-19 policies. He was really called out today by our moderator, which, by the way, he completely dodged all of those questions. So I think he's really struggling with his policies and plans. So the only chance the Men campaign has is to really get people riled up. I think it's similar to a Donald Trump situation that people don't like his policies, but if he gets them riled up enough, then people will start voting for him. And I think that's really the only shot he has for this general election.
So before we head to our political insider and Soren Szejk, biggest thing here, what's your predictions going forward, especially with still a lot more time before, and not just this primary election, but as well as the general election?
I think as far as the price, I think Preister and the Watkey-Stacy campaign will really be the only two campaigns that come out of this with still a fighting chance. I think the LaFata campaign we're going to see drop out pretty soon here, unless he has some sort of rejuvenation with his crowd presence. And I think Gabe Barros is unfortunately on his way out too. And if I had to predict, I think it's going to be I think it's going to be Watkey-Stacy versus Min for this general election. I just don't see Preister having the crowd engagement long term. I almost see the Preister campaign fizzling out. I think his fans are getting a little fatigued with some of his policies and his campaign. So I could see Watkey-Stacy Republican campaign for sure.
So, I mean, with that, you look very much so at Waukee Stacey being, I don't want to say a very far left version of the Democrats, but I think comparatively to the four candidates is a little bit more leaning. Is probably, I mean, if I had to give it, I'd probably put him at the 3 spot, maybe Luca a little bit further radical comparatively to the left. Min is by far very radical to the right. I think there is still some leeway for on a lot of different things. Like you said, a lot of those, sometimes those questions here today weren't able to be seen, kind of dodged a little bit. But we see once again that if we see Jimmy in this election, we see Jimmy in this final election, the general election, excuse me, does this continue that divide? We find one very comparatively within the population that we've had here, comparatively very conservative versus comparatively very liberal.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to continue through the general election to see this strong polarization. We don't really have the middlemen would probably be, like you were saying, more Preister and the Barros campaign. I think they would be more middle of the line, and obviously the Mann campaign, that's the only one left. So it's just we're gonna have to accept that it's gonna be a far right, radical right candidate. But yeah, I would say that the Waukee Stacey campaign, I think they're just going to keep going at it. Honestly, they've been, from the beginning, Min has really attacked Waukee Stacey for having those more extreme policies that are so polar from his own. So I think we're going to continue to see this divide, and a lot of the independents and the more middle people are going to have to make that decision between a really radical leftist and a really radical right candidate.
Thank you so much, Luke. So now up next, we're going to bring in our political insider, Soren Szejk. Soren Szejk, otherwise on Twitter known as Soren Sits Down, has been a really big piece of this election as well, really getting a lot of insight to these different election campaigns and really show a little bit more than what we've even seen here in a lot of these elections. So Soren, it's really great to have you on today.
Thank you.
So here with this election, I think the biggest thing here was really just Min being able to just have his own time up there. I know when we were talking earlier, we were both kind of surprised of what do we really have here. How does that help Min going forward, and does that give him more time to prepare for the general election?
Absolutely. I think it really does help Min, because when you have that time, everybody has to focus on just you. When you have multiple candidates up there, there's so much to focus on and so much to try and remember from what each candidate said. But when it's just you, everybody only is listening to just you.
So one other thing that I feel, other than some scandals that we saw earlier before our primary debate, I feel there's been a lot of questions on the FEC as a whole. We saw originally Thomas Pate being able to go on the election stage, on the debate stage last time for our first primary debate. We see here today that we're going to see three different candidates drop out, even though they've already either gotten vote for or have received some kind of delegates in our primary debates. The biggest thing to talk about, though, with those three dropping out, it is technically legally too late for them to do that and be able to get themselves off the ballot. However, from what I'm being told now, we have a very likely possibility that they could be taken off the poll or taken off the ballot going forward. Now, although that is not legally correct or not legally available, does that put in some questions of how we should just be able to look at our FEC in general?
Yeah, I talked to the head of the FEC the other day about the Thomas Pate situation, and they said to file for candidacy is how you get on the ballot, but you don't have to file for candidacy to get on the debate stage, which to me that response is a little questionable, because then that just means you or I could just walk up there without even filing for candidacy. So it does kind of bring up some questions about how legitimate things are, and I would like to see what they're going to do going forward, because like you said, if they do remove those candidates, that is not legally allowed. So I'm interested to see on what happens going forward.
So I guess with that going on with this point here, does that make us, or there's been so much questioning of the government in general, just especially within this past year, does this just add on to it?
In a sense it does, because you figure if we can't even elect officials the right way or elect certain parts of the government the right way without it being a little bit strange or have some scandals going around, it does bring up a lot of questions. But everything in the government is a little scandalous. There are always scandals in the government. So it's just kind of like something that in America we've learned to kind of deal with.
So I think let's turn pages now to the Democratic side. It's been a very close race. Really thought we saw three contenders throughout, but I think especially last week we thought Luka might be able to have a really big push. He loses the last two primaries in South Carolina and Arizona. His campaign, I don't want to say is falling apart, but it is really dropping in the numbers that it usually sees. We saw so much about LaFata being both the most knowledgeable, the most fit for president, and the most just fit to be able to lead this country as a whole. In our recent polls from our first debate, what is the reason for all these dropping numbers?
So from my perspective, I believe the dropping in the numbers is strictly due to the crowd liking him. I don't think it's not that he doesn't get a lot of crowd engagement, you know? Like you see like the Cade Preister or the Jimmy Waukee Stacy, where they have a lot of crowd engagement, whether it be their commercials that they're playing or when they are going off and doing rallies. They get a lot of involvement with the crowd. And I feel like Luka has, like you said, and everybody voted, he is the most knowledgeable and probably the most fit to be president. And he typically makes the best points while on the stage in the debate. But at some point, it kind of comes down to almost a popularity contest and who can get the most people to vote for them.
So I think one piece or policy that we talked about, Luka's really been the only one to actually put out policies in these debates of how he wants to lay some things out. A lot of other candidates, at least in my feeling, I think a lot by our viewers as well, have been, a lot of these candidates have just kind of been, I don't want to say nip around the edge, but have not quite been as concise in their plans. They kind of say their overall ideas and then go on there. Luka today, really, I think the biggest point, the biggest policy that I saw was his idea for the Supreme Court, having 5 elected officials within the Supreme Court, as well as 5 officials or judges within that court being somewhat the same as they are as appointed by the president. Although can be risky, although can be very radical, as Luka admitted, is this something we could even think of going forward?
I feel like it depends on the president that we have in place. For example, if we did have Luka, I feel like Luka is very passionate about his ideas, and he's very willing to try anything that the crowd or that his voters may want to see. I feel like Luka hasn't really displayed his best abilities yet, because I feel like he, like I said, doesn't really have that crowd engagement, and when he talks, people kind of just tune out almost, because I feel like most voters have already made their minds up and they're not really trying to listen to new people. But if Luka was elected president, I do believe that it could work in a sense, but it would take a lot of time to adjust.
So I think right now between both sides, whether Democratic or Republican, we talked to Lucas Stokely here in our pre-debate show, he was emphasizing to an extreme amount of how much the Republicans need to win California. I don't want to say it's split even between Democrats and Republicans in California, but it's a lot of delegates being able to work either way. If we're looking now to the general election, how big is California truly for this upcoming election? Is this going to be like a 2000 Florida?
Yeah, I feel like California may or may not decide who wins the election. I feel like typically you and I both know that the delegates from California are very drastic. It's a huge number in comparison to most other states. So winning California could win you the election.
So with that as well, there is that question or that push for the Republicans as a whole to just be able to find California, California. Is there somewhat the same thing for the Democrats? Is California that big of an adjustment for them or a need for them? Or can they rely on the vast amount of registered Democrats that are already in our population?
I feel like, in my perspective, I would try and get California for sure on board. But I feel like most of these Democrats are just kind of already, they aren't really focused on one state, and they're just focused on the broad majority of Democrats. And I'm talking about each individual candidate. I don't see them doing much of like singling out states, for example, like the Republicans may do in trying stealing California. And I feel like that may hurt the Democrats because they aren't trying necessarily to work to that one state, for example, California. They are just trying to get the vast majority of Democrat votes.
So, final thing here before we end up this pre-debate show. I think one thing, if we're going to talk about the Republican side, if they can truly find a way to win this election, because we've seen the Democrats just outweigh the Republicans by a just vast margin. I believe, if I'm correct, we have 70% Democrats compared to just barely 18% Republicans that have registered either for our recent polls or in our recent primaries. But I think a thing to talk about here for men. Some controversy as well. This entire campaign has been riddled with different controversies back and forth between the recent fake accounts that we started off here. And now I think the biggest thing to talk about for men is his back and forth with Lucas Sokolik, or rumored back and forth with Lucas Sokolik, about whether Lucas is really going to endorse him even as the Republican national chair. Men is the only candidate truly left. Now, this back and forth instance on men not being vaccinated or reportedly not being vaccinated will this bridge a divide within the Republican Party?
It may not divide the whole Republican Party when you're talking about the officials and the voters, but I do feel like that conflict within the Republican chair and the only presidential candidate left is gonna compromise. It could potentially compromise men's campaign, because that is most definitely the man that he needs to support him the most is the Republican chair. And if he doesn't have that support, then I'm not sure how well he's going to do. If he can't even get the support of his own party chair, I don't know how he's going to win over all the Democrats.
So with this going forward, what do you see this election playing out?
I do believe that Maine will be the Republican nominee for obvious reasons, and I can still see it going any of the three ways in Luca or Cade or Jimmy. But I do believe that Jimmy will probably come out on top, because I feel Jimmy has that crowd engagement, and we did see a little bit today of him trying to involve those policies, which I still feel that Cade Preister lacks. I feel like when Preister is up there and he's talking, I feel like he is just kind of trying to be more broad and be like, oh, I'm willing to listen to anybody, instead of stating what he truly supports and what he truly will do if he gets into office.
All right, cool. Thank you so much, Soren.
Yeah, of course.
So that will end today's WNN post-debate show. It's been two really good debates today, one town hall and a debate here today. Of course, get out to vote, register to vote on our website. Of course, Hawaii will be our next primary election on Monday, then Super Tuesday, as always. New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island will be next Friday. A lot to keep moving forward. We'll be back here next Friday for the national convention, to where we will see our final two big nominees that will move on to the general election. Thank you so much. Of course, here on WNN, my name is Jaden Taylor. As always, this is WNN coverage you can count on.